The Brazos County has a new task force to combat a growing problem in Texas, what they're doing to raise awareness in the community. Plus, shining a light on public information as part of National News Literacy Week, we go in depth on public information requests.
We do have a small, compact storm system making its way across the Red River. That's going to throw snow across North Texas into Oklahoma. Nothing for us, though. Maybe things change moisture-wise next week. Your 25 News starts right now.
Connecting the Brazos Valley, this is KRHD News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Hallie Jones. Sex trafficking, especially child sex trafficking, is a crime so horrific many of us have a hard time understanding it could happen in our own communities. But the numbers tell a different story. KRHD reporter Rebecca Fiedler shows us a new law enforcement program to keep our kids safe.
Within Brazos County, the youngest victim served by local advocacy nonprofit Unbound was just 12 years old. Unbound of Bryan College Station has assisted a total of 54 people identified as victims of human trafficking in Aggie Land. A number of these victims were juveniles.
Most, if not all, of the clients that we work with have a very close relationship with the person who's been exploiting them. Whether it's a family member, somebody they're in a very close relationship with, or even a dating relationship.
Unfortunately, where there is a demand for human trafficking, there will be some supply. And based on research by the Brazos County DA, the market is here.
That we worked with the Attorney General's office to do a prostitution sting to see what was the demand for trafficking in this particular area a few months ago. And in one day, I believe that we got 9 different Johns.
Law enforcement says our area's proximity to Houston, a major trafficking hub, is compounded by the frequency of large events hosted in Bryan and College Station. 2 years ago, several local agencies and nonprofits worked alongside the Office of the Governor to come up with action plans for responding to child sex trafficking incidents. This month, those protocols have been written up and finalized.
What we've been doing over the last few years was mapping out what do we do if this child shows up in any and all sectors of law enforcement, child protective services, Unbound, a prosecutor. What if they show up as a defendant?
These protocols are important because experts say child sex trafficking isn't as cut and dry and easy to identify as it is in TV crime dramas. This new task force is comprised of groups such as Unbound, Baylor Scott & White, Scotty's House, and nearly all local law enforcement agencies. Reporting in Bryan, Rebecca Fiedler, KRHD News.
According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline's 2020 statistics, there were over 10,000 cases reported that year. A quarter of those cases involved minors. Nearly 1,000 cases in the country came from Texas, coming in just behind California for the most cases that year. Of the different kinds of human trafficking, sex trafficking makes up the majority of cases. In other news, one of the ways we shine a light on what our governments do with our money is we look at public records. As 25 News in-depth reporter Dennis Turner explains, you can actually do the same.
Cameron Page didn't have to know a lot about the Freedom of Information Act to know its importance. Have you heard much about the Freedom of Information Act?
No, I haven't.
As Cameron guessed, the answer is in the name. It began during the 1960s and the administration of Lyndon Johnson as the U.S. looked to accentuate its differences with closed communist society. So what was the law designed for? Why do we have it, and how easy is it to use?
There's actually a local Texas law called the Texas Public Information Act, which was passed in 1973. But the history of FOIA goes as far back as Lyndon Johnson. So a senator named John Moss originally put this legislation forward on a national level. And basically what FOIA stands for is it is a transparency tool that everyday citizens can use to get information that the government holds in their records.
Among things FOIA doesn't cover, some confidential or personal information, issues involving national security. Personnel issues don't typically get released, nor does information on contract negotiations. Before you file to find out something from our government, make sure the government hasn't already published it. Because the government pushes out mountains and mountains of paper every day
A lot of information is already publicly made available for free. So before you go submitting a FOIA request, one common thing I would always advise doing is checking to see if that information has already been published, because in a lot of cases, there's a good chance it's already available on the internet.
You have to be very specific, don't you? I mean, intensely specific.
Know what you're looking for. Don't go on a fishing expedition. And then be specific. Really describe the thing that you are looking for to help the person out on the other end who's trying to complete that request for you. They will produce those records in a reasonable amount of time.
Define reasonable here. Reasonable, the government may consider like a couple of years reasonable, and I need this stuff next Tuesday.
The agencies will use a process to prioritize those requests. The simpler requests tend to move to the front of the line and get answered as soon as they can be. Oftentimes, if your request is very complex, then that might take longer for the agency to respond to you.
Reporters use the law to get records that lead to coverage of how our tax money gets spent, among other things. Attorney Jason Milam used the Freedom of Information Act to draw attention to problems with the Texas theft of service law. That law allowed rental companies to charge us with theft and have us arrested, sometimes with almost no evidence, if we didn't return a rental item.
So being able to get information on people who had been charged in these crimes, the number of people who had been charged, both through these Information Act requests and through the clerk's offices, was really instrumental in demonstrating the scope of the problem and also the location of the problem, that it was a lot of here. It was housed in Central Texas that were a big hotbed of it.
So, with the evidence he gathered from the Freedom of Information Act, Milam successfully got lawmakers to change the law. We've had the Freedom of Information Act since 1966. Since then, it's undergone a number of tweaks and changes. Some of them make information easier to get, some of them a little harder. There's been some back and forth, but the last few changes have all been positive toward more information coming from our governments.
When Lyndon B. Johnson signed this legislation originally, at the end of the signature, he said, "I sign this with a measure of a deep sense of pride that the United States is an open society." And yet, at every single turn, every government agency has kind of resisted this type of legislation. And you can see why. Nobody wants to have somebody digging around in their business.
It's true, but we have the opportunity to try. And opportunity is what America is all about. Dennis Turner, 25 News.
Ahead of National Holocaust Remembrance Day tomorrow, reporter Nick Bradshaw speaks with a survivor about his experiences.
But I describe my life like the stock market, up and down, and everybody laughed.
Notice the age of 10 to 14, the young folk.
Very painful.
Jewish dwellings are filthy and neglected.
We're standing in our memorial and reflection room at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum.
But they live for generations in the same dirty and bug-ridden dwellings.
How to cope with tragedy. Grief is how you handle it. There were many people killed.
The International Holocaust Remembrance Day was established by the United Nations in 2005 to honor all of the victims of the Holocaust. January 27th is the anniversary of the date that Auschwitz-Birkenau was liberated, and Auschwitz-Birkenau was the largest Nazi death camp during World War II.
I went in in 1951, and when I was in Fort Hood, I would come into Dallas, where I met my wife. I went to food service school in Fort Hood, and I was the honor student.
He's taught me about the power of resilience and love and, faith and strength.
And fight and liberate you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's a V deal at wartime or in any time that's a disaster.
A new COVID variant is spreading across the globe and in the U.S. The good news is the World Health Organization and others say BA2 is not highly concerning. It's a mutation of the original Omicron variant, which is known as BA1. These subvariants are typical and also happened with the Delta variant. Meanwhile, Omicron continues to shatter hospitalization and case records. But when comparing those ER visits and hospitalizations to case numbers, they're actually lower than they were during the Delta wave. Those newly published findings from the CDC also show ICU admissions, length of hospital stays, and deaths were all lower with Omicron. The report cautions that disease severity indicators are likely lower because vaccines and boosters are in the mix. Still, vaccine rates remain alarmingly low in children. As of last week, only about 28% of children ages 5 to 11 have gotten one dose of the COVID vaccine. Less than 20% are considered fully vaccinated, and this represents just over 8 million of the approximately 28 million children in this age group in the United States. The rate in which vaccines were administered to this age group peaked before Thanksgiving, which is why parents are the target of a new vaccine ambassador program.
Going to the pool, the neighborhood pool this summer with my kids, so many people came up to me and asked me questions. They'd be like, oh, so you know this person and this person because your child plays soccer with this person. Can I ask you a question about COVID? And I was like, sure. And so that's when I realized that I think that there is this natural way that parents just talk to other parents about what's going on.
Mom of two and Johns Hopkins behavioral scientist RuPaul E. LeMay studies vaccine hesitancy and behaviors. She's the instructor of the online training program for how to talk to parents about COVID-19 vaccines. The idea is to give accurate information and confidence to talk to anyone who might be hesitant or misinformed. It comes at a time when more children are getting sicker from COVID.
I think the message for so long was that great news, COVID is mild in children, and that's not really the case with this current variant.
A parent advisory group helped design this course. It's short slides, animated videos, and additional resources on topics people may want to learn more about. She addresses one of the biggest concerns she hears.
They say, well, the vaccine was developed in so-and-so time. So we try to go through the process and explain that coronavirus vaccines actually have been in development for more than 20 years. We were able to leverage different technologies to be able to bring a vaccine to the market very efficiently because we were in the middle of a pandemic.
Now, the course is free and available on Coursera. Just search COVID and parents. It's believed to be a first-of-its-kind measure in the U.S., requiring gun owners to carry liability insurance. What legal experts are saying about this ordinance holding up.
Tensions remain high as Russia continues to build up troops on the Ukrainian border. All week long, we've been hearing about the possibility of an invasion, but you may still be wondering, why is Russia so interested in that country? Our Joe St. George breaks it down.
Ukraine. If you look at a globe, you may have trouble finding it, but the country located in Eastern Europe is where 44 million people live. Right now, U.S. officials say more than 100,000 Russian troops are on the border. The capital of Ukraine and the capital of Russia are separated by an 11-hour drive or so.
Tensions between Ukraine and Russia have been high for years, with Russia invading back in 2014. So why is Moscow so interested in the Eastern European country?
We're just seeing the Russians, and Putin in this case, trying to restore somewhat greater Russia.
Jim Townsend is the United States' former Deputy Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO. He says you can't understand this crisis without first understanding history. During the Cold War, Russia was part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union consisted of much of Eastern Europe, including Ukraine. Townsend says its collapse in the 1990s has always upset Russian President Vladimir Putin.
And Putin, of course, was a creature of the Cold War. Putin laid this out in a speech this past summer, saying that there's really not a country of Ukraine. Ukraine is Russia.
Many Ukrainians, of course, disagree, which is why leaders there have increased their reliance on the United States and our military. U.S. equipment has been used for years. The Florida National Guard is even training Ukrainian troops right now. That upsets Moscow.
He doesn't want to see those forces too close to him. He likens this to the Cuban Missile Crisis. He says, how would you feel, United States, if we went back to Cuba.
A conflict, if it happens, could impact your life. U.S. troops could deploy and gas prices could go up since Russia produces so much of the world's energy. If you're wondering why now, Townsend says Russia may think conditions are right for them to get away with it. Germany's longtime leader Angela Merkel has just left office, and President Biden is struggling to convince the world he can heal America's divisions. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
The U.S. has delivered a written response to Moscow's security demands on Ukraine. While the letter has not been made public, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says the U.S. has made no concessions to Russian demands, calling them unacceptable. President Biden has warned of global consequences if Russia invades Ukraine.
Let me conclude by saying there will be enormous consequences if he were to go in and invade, as he could, the entire country, or a lot less than that as well, for Russia, not only in terms of economic consequences and political consequences, but it'll be enormous consequences worldwide. This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Russia has warned it would take retaliatory measures if the U.S. and allies reject its demands. The U.S. Supreme Court Justice is apparently ready to hang up his robe. Sources say Justice Stephen Breyer plans to retire after serving more than 2 decades on the High Court. The 83-year-old has been a consistent liberal vote on the court since he was sworn into office in 1994. Then President Bill Clinton nominated him to the bench. Breyer is expected to stay on until the end of the term and until Congress confirms his replacement. His retirement would give President Biden a chance to nominate a new liberal voice to the court for the first time since Justice Elena Kagan was sworn in back in 2010. The Federal Reserve is preparing to raise interest rates. In its Wednesday announcement, the Fed cited high inflation and a strong labor market as the reason behind its decision. Interest rates have been low for a very long time. The Fed slashed them to near zero in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. The Fed indicated last month that there would be multiple rate hikes throughout 2022. Investors expect the first one to happen at the Fed's next meeting in March.
And today we did see a couple of passing clouds from time to time on our Extra Co Eagle Eye, and showing you your sky in motion here on the time lapse. Again, not a lot, still plenty of sunshine out there, and that did warm us up a little bit, but a pretty chilly air mass has been across the region, and we may see a few clouds creep in from the southwest later on tonight going into the morning hours. There is a storm system that went through West Texas and the Panhandle earlier, dumping some snow there. Now that's moving it across southwestern Oklahoma into North Texas, far north reaches of DFW up into the Red River Valley in southern Oklahoma. They'll likely see some snow tonight in a few areas with accumulation. You can see the darker blue starting to take place here from just east of Childress to Wichita Falls and Lawton, Oklahoma. So some accumulating snow possible to our northwest, but not here in the Brazos Valley, as that will be going east and not southeast. So for tonight, a few clouds around from time to time, but I still think it'll get chilly with temperatures down into the 30s in the morning. By the afternoon, we're looking at partly to mostly cloudy skies. Temperatures could be a touch warmer tomorrow in the upper 50s and low 60s. Then we get to Friday. This is not showing too much in the morning hours, but still not going to rule out an isolated shower early Friday morning, but by Friday afternoon, we're looking at sunshine, and that's going to lead us to a sunny and mild weekend on the way. Looking good there. So tonight, temperatures will be taking their way down into the 30s. So all of us getting there, maybe close to freezing from Madisonville, Franklin up to Centerville. And then tomorrow, highs will be into the upper 50s and low 60s. A very pleasant day across the area, just a hair below normal for this time of year. And we will continue to see some below normal temperatures on Friday. Again, an isolated shower chance and northerly winds. Then the winds come out of the southwest over the weekend. That warms us up. Highs into the mid to upper 60s, lows at night into the 30s and 40s. Next storm system, better chance of rain coming in on Monday, 61 degrees for a high. Then we get a little break Tuesday. And then guess what? We may have another chance of rain. This is something we need to get a more active pattern in here and start to get rid of this drought in just a little bit, so that rain chance will go on by the middle part of next week.
San Jose, California just became the first city to pass an ordinance requiring gun owners to buy liability insurance. The ordinance says the insurance would cover losses or damages resulting from any accidental use of the firearm. A gun owner would also be considered liable until a theft or loss of a weapon is reported to authorities. There will also be an additional $25 annual fee to own a gun. Lawmakers there say both the liability insurance and the fees are designed to encourage gun safety. A nonprofit who helps victims of gun violence says it's a small price to pay.
We're asking gun owners essentially to give up 5 commercial cups of coffee a year to pay for the fine.
But a law expert we spoke with doesn't see this measure having the impact leaders and advocates in San Jose are hoping for.
The law-abiding citizen who owns a firearm for protection and who lawfully owns such is not the problem. What we're doing is we're ignoring the people who actually cause the problem, which by and large tends to be career criminals who do not lawfully own their guns and certainly are not going to pay a tax.
Robert Cottrell with George Washington University says he'd like to see more regulation around illegal gun sales and ownership instead. He says some of the best solutions to gun violence he's seen comes from jurisdictions that have enhanced penalties for criminal misuse of firearms.
That's targeting, in fact, the population that is causing the problem of gun violence.
California does have some state laws that address this problem, like enforcing criminal charges for negligent use of a gun and felony charges for stealing a firearm. San Jose's mayor has other plans under the new measure. The money that comes from the ownership fee is intended to go to a newly created nonprofit that works to reduce gun violence. The mayor hopes in turn this will reduce costs to taxpayers since the city spends millions of dollars each year responding to crimes involving guns. Refunds are coming from an online loan company with shady practices. The Federal Trade Commission sued Avant for a number of issues that include falsely advertising that it would accept debit and credit cards for payments, charging customers additional interest, withdrawing money from customers' accounts without authorization, giving deceptive payoff quotes, and trying to collect more than what was owed. As part of the settlement, more than 17,000 customers will get checks averaging a little more than $200 each. Over the course of the pandemic, millions of Americans have unexpectedly found themselves out of work. Some by choice, others because their job was eliminated or they had to take care of a loved one. Chris Conti shows us how some have successfully rebounded. We check in with one and ask that simple question, how are you doing?
Like the tides along the shore here, the pandemic has created its share of ups and downs these last few years.
I had not worked for almost 10 years in a corporate environment, and technology has really moved quickly in the past 10 years.
That is Leslie Schwimmer. We first met her last year when things weren't going so great.
Everything I put into that, I never thought it was an option not to succeed.
When the pandemic hit South Florida, this small business owner was forced into bankruptcy, having to close down the massage business she'd been running.
Do you think your age is the biggest thing that's keeping you from getting a job right now?
I think so. I tried to mask my age as much as I can.
At 58 years old, Leslie was convinced she'd aged out of the job market. But listen to her now.
I kind of feel like I'm in the perfect place and everything just worked out the way it was meant to be.
After an exhaustive search, Leslie landed on her feet. She's now selling medical devices for a small company based in Florida.
I really am happy. I love the day-to-day of what I do.
While she misses running her own business, she does not miss the stress that came along with it.
I really enjoy getting a check every 2 weeks and not worrying about paying everybody else.
As for the 2 million or so long-term unemployed Americans still looking for a new job, Leslie says don't give up.
When I look at the jobs that I didn't get, that I have to admit I cried over and said, I just don't understand. I was perfectly qualified. I know I was a good candidate. And when I analyze them now, as opposed to where I am, I think that, again, I'm where I should be.
For Leslie, being asked, how are you doing, is something she really enjoys answering now.
I loved what I did before, but I really like this new challenge, and I hope that I do it for many, many, many years.
Amid all the ups and downs of this pandemic, some good news off the horizon. I'm Chris Conti.
Chris, thank you for that report. Well, giving low-income moms a little extra cash each month could actually change their baby's brain. How researchers determine this and what it could mean for future policy like the advanced child tax credit. There has been growing focus around how extra cash each month with no strings attached could help certain Americans. One of the latest universal basic income programs focuses specifically on new moms. Those living in low-income neighborhoods of New York City are receiving between $500 to $1,000 a month for 3 years. The advanced child tax credit is another thing during the pandemic that made a big impact for families. We've heard from families about how the up to $300 a month per child helped them provide for their kids in ways they may not have been able to otherwise. But new research is also showing the impact cash support like this may have on a child's development as well. It could underscore how sensitive children are to their environments early in childhood.
Generally, we can think about how cash might help stabilize or support children in their home environments and things like paying bills to keep the lights on or buying cleaning products. But we can also look to see how cash may be used for child-specific items like diapers or car seats or a crib.
The baby's first year study included 1,000 low-income moms shortly after they gave birth. Some were given a little more than $300 a month. The rest received $20 a month. After a year of receiving that money to use how they chose, the babies and the families who received more money had faster activity in key areas of their brain, showing stronger cognitive development.
Because we were able to randomize families between these two groups, the only thing that should be different is this cash gift. And so that is how we're able to say we think the cash gift is what is impacting these brain measurements.
The researchers tested the infants' brains using special caps that recorded the brain's electrical activity. The study continues to specifically focus on how families are using the cash. They'll also be following up on the kids again this summer around their 4th birthday to track their cognitive development. Well, it's no surprise that professional fact checkers are better than the rest of us at evaluating unfamiliar websites, but we're finding out the tricks you can take away from them to ensure your information comes from trustworthy sources.
Over $1.2 million has gone to Latinos in the Brazos Valley from the Hispanic Forum, and the nonprofit says there's still much work to be done helping students reach their goals in higher education. KRHD News reporter Brittany DeFran shares the impact it's making in the community.
As a son of a Mexican-American father and an African-American mother, Mark Romero has seen his parents' fair share of trials and tribulations. This inspired him to work hard to achieve his academic goals.
I never really thought too much of it, when in reality, it basically changed my entire college experience. And that was honestly one of the best decisions I've made in my senior year.
With the community supporting the Hispanic Forum during a financially tough year, they were able to award Romero $10,000 to support his future career goals.
We're all affected by this pandemic, but if we all come together and work hard, we can help these students achieve their goals.
Last year, the organization raised $151,000 to support the next generation. This year's application process has officially opened. The deadline is March 31st. And Brittany DeFran, KRHD News.
Texas A&M has been designated as a Hispanic serving institution from the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. The HACU awards the designation for institutions where Hispanic enrollment makes up a minimum of 25% of total undergraduate students. A&M met this requirement in fall of 2020 and again in fall 2021. It's been 2 years since the horrible helicopter crash in California claimed the lives of 9 people, including NBA superstar Kobe Bryant. Here's WTAW's Zach Taylor with sports.
Here's your 25 Sports Update with WTAW Zach Taylor.
Hey KRHD viewers, 4th-ranked Baylor men's basketball had no problem with Kansas State last night, 74-49. Meanwhile, Texas rolled past TCU, 73-50. Now tonight, Texas A&M pays a visit to LSU. The Aggies have dropped 2 straight, while the Tigers have lost 3 in a row. Tip-off is at 8 o'clock in Baton Rouge. Former Boston Red Sox slugger David Ortiz has been elected into baseball's Hall of Fame. Ortiz was the only player to make the cut this year. MLB all-time home run leader Barry Bonds and 7-time Cy Young Award winner Roger Clemens were left out on their 10th and final ballots. The San Antonio Spurs look to build on yesterday's victory over Houston when they host the Memphis Grizzlies tonight at 7:30. Meanwhile, the Dallas Mavericks visit the Portland Trailblazers at 9. American Danielle Collins is back in the Australian Open semifinals after sweeping past Elise Cornet. Stefanos Tsitsipas has advanced for the men, as has Daniel Medvedev. From the WTAW Sports Studio, I'm Zach Taylor.
Cybersecurity is a top concern for both the government and private companies, but there's a delay in key oversight. The Cyber Safety Review Board, which was created last May by a White House executive order, still hasn't been set up. The board will investigate major incidents to prevent them from happening again. The Department of Homeland Security is in charge of the board. It says it anticipates an announcement soon, but did not address why the process has taken so long. Cybersecurity isn't just an outside threat. Organizations are spending more time and money to fix incidents associated with problems like careless employees, criminal or malicious insiders, or cybercriminal credential theft. A report by Proofpoint, a cybersecurity and compliance company, found the frequency of these insider threats has dramatically increased. Students with disabilities are getting new protections to make sure it's safe for them to go to school in person during the pandemic. We've been following this story for months since our team went to Iowa to talk with families who are suing over a law there. It would have restricted face mask mandates at local schools. This week, an appeals court ruled in support of those families. It says the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act require schools to impose universal masking rules where necessary to ensure students with disabilities have access to public school education. Experts say there's a misconception that just because young people are proficient at using digital devices, they're also good at making sense of the information provided by those devices. This week, we've again teamed up with the News Literacy Project to shine a light on better information consumption and sharing. Today, Usher Qureshi looks at just how difficult it can be for young people to separate fact from fiction.
Researchers at the Stanford History Education Group completed a national survey of more than 3,000 American high schoolers looking at how they evaluate real sources online.
It's the largest study to date of its kind.
Joel Breakstone heads the Stanford group and has been studying news literacy among high schoolers for the past 6 years. He says they found that students struggle to make even basic evaluations about the validity of online information.
Students had trouble. For instance, when we presented students with a website that denied humans' role in global warming.
CO2 emissions and fossil fuel use have actually enhanced life.
Breakstone says 96% of the students could not identify that the website actually had connections to the fossil fuel industry. Information that he says was immediately available through simple online searches.
Similarly, when we showed them a Facebook video claiming to show voter fraud during the 2016 presidential Democratic primaries, they overwhelmingly took it at face value. Again,
a quick Google search, he says, would have led them to a whole series of articles debunking the video, including one from the BBC indicating the video that was viewed more than 1 million times was actually about voter fraud in Russia and had nothing to do with fraud in the U.S.
Out of more than 3,000 students, only 3, less than 0.1%, made that connection to the Russian source for the videos.
Researchers also compared how Stanford freshmen, young people in Silicon Valley, and history professors stacked up against fact-checkers from some of the nation's leading news organizations, and found striking differences in how well they evaluated unfamiliar websites.
The fact-checkers were way better than the Stanford students or the historians, and the reason was that they didn't stay on an unfamiliar website.
One of those websites was minimumwage.com.
And most of the students and many of the historians took that website at face value.
The site says it's a project of the Employment Policies Institute and is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization.
All of the fact checkers left the website and quickly discovered that the institute is actually run by a PR firm that is working for the food and beverage industry and has a vested interest in employment issues, and particularly minimum wage.
While Breakstone isn't saying everyone must become a professional fact checker, he does say that critical thinking and cross-referencing are key to being better informed.
We think in our current digital age, being able to find good information online is a critical component of being a participating member in our democracy.
One tip, he says, just because a website ends in .edu or .org doesn't necessarily mean it's trustworthy. I'm Usher Qureshi reporting.
Usher, thank you for that. Well, teaching rats to drive using an accelerator and even steering could have big implications for understanding human brain diseases. The answers it could give us for diseases like Alzheimer's.
There has been snow in Texas today, but not here in the Brazos Valley, and we're not anticipating any. But from the far reaches of the DFW area up into Oklahoma, we could be seeing a little bit of snowfall for tonight. A little heavier across Oklahoma than in the Texas side, but still definitely letting you know it's winter's not too far away. But around here, it will be chilly tonight. A few clouds will be possible from time to time, but nothing significant. By tomorrow afternoon, partly to mostly cloudy skies will take over. I think it stays dry through the day tomorrow, so we don't have to worry about any rain. Tomorrow night into early Friday morning, this not showing too much, but I'm not going to rule out maybe an isolated shower or two, and then we'll keep it clear as we make our way into Friday afternoon, and that's going to lead us to a really nice weekend around here. So tonight, temperatures falling into the 30s area-wide, and with light winds, it's not going to feel too bad out there, but definitely jacket weather in the morning, and then highs upper 50s, near 60 degrees as we make our way through our day on Thursday. Again, nothing too earth-shattering there. And same for Friday, as we're going to be seeing temperatures into the low to mid 50s, maybe an isolated shower chance early on Friday. Weekend's looking great. Highs into the mid to upper 60s, lows at night into the 30s and 40s. So we are going to enjoy that weekend out there, because Monday the rain moves back in. Models continue to increase it, so we are slowly increasing it as well, up to 50%. If the latest models today are right, it could even be higher than that. Tuesday, that gets out of here, but then a stronger storm system moves in by the middle part of next week. It will have a strong cold front with it as well, but we're going to keep everything in the liquid form as of now and continue to track it for you, with a chance of scattered showers and thunderstorms and more rain chances on Wednesday, possibly lingering into Thursday.
Anti-Asian hate crimes continue to be an issue. The newsfeed starts with San Francisco officials pledging to better protect Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Police there reported 60 cases of anti-Asian hate crimes last year. That's a 567% increase. Authorities say just 9 of these crimes were reported there in 2020 and 8 reported the year before. Well, there's a new push to get groups to come up with novel ways to fight indifference and hatred and discrimination. The Auschwitz Pledge Foundation will be giving out grants globally for this effort. This announcement comes one day before the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The U.S. is planning to capture more wild horses this year than ever before. According to the Bureau of Land Management Director, the agency plans to permanently remove 19,000 horses in burrows this year. That's a 70% increase from the previous year. Scientists say a blood test may one day indicate if a person will suffer from long COVID. A small study published in the journal Nature Communications found people with long COVID have lower levels of certain antibodies in their blood. This was after becoming infected with the virus. Researchers say the findings still need to be confirmed in larger studies, but being able to identify long COVID earlier could mean better treatment. There's now a clinical drug trial underway to try to find a solution to at least one of the long COVID's most debilitating symptoms. Tomorrow, how researchers are targeting the fatigue that has become common for a growing number of people. The future of many of our cities is in flux. For 2 years, we've talked about the effects COVID has had on office buildings and the lack of people inside of them. Now, Dan Grossman found cities are planning long-term as they realize changes are here to stay.
We are told change is the only constant. And if that's true, then adaptation must be the only way forward.
It's not that same hustle and bustle as it was, this time 2 years ago.
It's 7:30 on a Thursday morning at one of the busiest subway stops in Manhattan. And for a city that supposedly never sleeps, things are drowsy.
People escaped, moved out. It changed a lot. Normally my commute in the morning is just under 25 minutes or so on the subway door to door.
This is Andrew Weinstein.
8 seconds from my bed to my desk, yes.
He's one of the millions in New York that has traded a commute to his office for a commute to his desk. At the start of the pandemic, subway ridership in New York fell by 92% according to the city. And today, it has only recovered to 40% of its pre-pandemic levels. But it's not just here. In our nation's capital, the daytime population fell 82% between February 2020 and February 2021. In San Jose, office occupancy is only at 20% of what it used to be. And in Chicago, that number is only 24%. It has meant fewer people, less money, less business.
It is different. It is different.
Andrea Saleccia manages a coffee shop near Rockefeller Center. He's cut staff, changed hours, and still struggles. But it's a win, considering he's the only shop in his high-rises lobby that's still running.
It's not for the New York regulations anymore, it's for the company's regulation. Pretty much it killed the business because, we used to have over 600 people a day in this store, and now we barely reach 100 if it's a good day.
To adapt, cities have suggested getting creative with zoning laws to reduce things like parking and change them into pedestrian zones. They've also considered embracing things like outdoor dining to promote cultural experiences. In Madison, Wisconsin, that's happening as the city is working to expand outdoor dining further. And Eugene, Oregon is building a 3.5-acre park that will permanently house its farmers market. Things that are a far cry from the point A to point B hustle of the past.
The beauty of this city is the way that it evolves with whatever is happening.
Change is inevitable, and in 2 years that have brought so much of it, so is the resiliency that inevitably follows.
It's not like New York anymore, not the one I've seen before.
I'm Dan Grossman.
Thanks for watching KRHD News at 6 o'clock. I'm back tonight at 10. Until then, have a great evening.